And we are live. It's Wednesday, so you know what that means. This must be Woke Women Wednesday. Senator Dianne Wilkerson here with you this morning. Happy Wednesday, everyone. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day out today. We deserve it because from all accounts, it appears that the cold winter is coming. I don't know about you, but people who know me know that I have this deal with God, and this is it. I don't complain about hot weather. I like the heat, so I never complain. It can't ever be too hot for me. In exchange, he lets me complain all winter. I do not like the cold, do not anticipate the cold, and not happy about it coming. And so I'm trying to drain every last minute I can out of the sunshine that we have. So enjoy the day. Make sure you get out. It's going to be a beautiful day. I start the way I always do, and that is to say thank you to the women with a vision, the women who intuitively knew 2 years ago, about to be 3 years soon, that we needed to have a medium by which we could bring information to you in a timely fashion. And so hats off to the women, wwocmedia.com, who allow me to be here every Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. To smile at you and to greet you and to say it's time for Woke Women Wednesday. It's quite a bit of things to talk about, and I want to do some recap from last week. I think I shared with you last week that the plan is that we are going to be spending a good month, August and even October and into November, showcasing some of the most incredible talent and artists in the world, in the country, from Boston. We have so much. It is so much. Last week, I was so excited because she brought so much energy, Shaumba Dibinga. And I know there's a whole lot longer piece of her name, but I'm going to say Shaumba Dibinga, who is here, an artistic directors and co-founder of Origination. Anybody who don't know what that is, I can't imagine because it's such a household word and name. And important to say, not only do they produce some of the best artistic talent, dancers and artists and rappers and poetry, but the human beings that they are helping to create. And she shared with us some of the where are they now from the alumni. What an incredibly impressive list. So hats off. Then at the end of our show, we had a surprise visitor, the guest, also artistic director, Ma Fons. And I can't even remember the last name because I don't want to mispronounce. But Ma Fons is the artistic director for the show that ended on Sunday called Drum Folk, the pictorial history of the use and purpose of drums and drumming for Black people. The Negro Act of 1740 that banned the use of writing, reading, and use of drums because people were fearful that Black people were using those drums to communicate. So what did Black folks do in our creative minds that we are? We just started using our bodies for drumming. You know, we talk about hand, bone, and all the stuff we used to do, or we saw, we watched, never made the connection, never knew, right? We used our hands, we used our feet, and that use of feet turned into an art that is decidedly Black called stepping. And the whole history that was walked out, drummed out, tapped out in Drum Folk. If you didn't get to see it, it's worth, get on a plane, travel somewhere to go see it because it would be worth it, right? So here it is. This week is the annual event for Origination. So it's just so appropriate. Like I said, we would be in this month of honoring our artistic talent on Saturday, the annual event, Twist and Shout. Don't miss it, don't miss it, don't miss it, right? Just don't miss it. It is going to be at the Helen Calderwood Theater at, 527 Tremont Street. If I didn't say it already, I'm going to say it because I'm going to share a bit of information with you. So if you're listening, just make sure you have a pen ready or your thumb next to the note section on your phone because there's some information, your important information you're going to want to write down. So I'm going to start with that. Saturday, Calderwood Calderwood Theater, Saturday, October 22nd, Twist and Shout, the annual performance origination. It is a fundraiser. So folks, get your tickets, go on their website and make sure you patronize, right? This is such an important program for our young people. As I said, believe me, they teach them a whole lot more than how to dance. You don't want to miss that either. What else is happening? This has just really been a month. I started, I think, the first week in October at the Strand Theater. I got to see the presentation, the artistic performance. We Move in Color. Again, an artistic history, showed the art and dance, the history of kind of of how Black folks have so impacted what we call art in this country. Always a pleasure to watch Wyatt Jackson. It was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. The talent, incredible talent. And I'm hoping, I know that they're off to New Jersey. I hope they are back at some point. I'm hearing that they may be back in the spring, and we'll get to see them. If we do, don't miss it. Don't miss it. And then, okay, I talked about We Move in Color, Drum Folk, Originations, Twist and Shout this Saturday. One of my guests for today had a last minute serious family crisis, and so won't be joining us. But don't worry, you're going to see the talent in the next several weeks. I will have, right? Paul Goodnight. Some of you may watch, this every week, and you see me sitting. I'm always sitting underneath a piece of art and behind me. I have 3 here in my living room, but this one behind me is one of my favorites from Paul Goodnight. And you'll see his art often when you're watching some of the TV shows or cultural Black TV shows, the family shows where they have art. You'll see his art hanging on. That's just how bad he is, right? He got it like that. And so I consider it an honor to be able to hang one of his pieces on my wall. But he's going to be here next week. And so don't miss it. Don't miss it. For some people, it'll be the first time they, introduction, and not even realizing that gentleman whose art you have on your wall, it lives right here in Roxbury, has been forever, and will say that proudly. So you'll get to see and hear him as well. So, want to do some updates for you too. I think last week when we were here on the Wednesday, it was the same morning that we learned about the brutal attack of one of our most beloved icons, heroes, giants in the Commonwealth on matters of education. The Dr. Gene Mcguire, the founder. First, her claim to fame is she's just a brilliant woman, right? She, how can I say, she was the first Black woman elected to the citywide to the Boston School Committee in 1983, the first. And she served admirably for over a decade, and also claimed the fame, the founder of the Metropolitan Transportation Education, METCO, we call it METCO Corporation. I don't know. I think there's so many different cities and towns across the country that have equivalents, right? METCO, creating organizations that were responsible from within a community for getting our children to the suburban schools once we had the 1968 Racial Imbalance Act. And of course, go back, 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, which the Supreme Court made school segregation unlawful and directed cities and towns across this country to integrate. So she was, again, in the thick of it, You'll see her Thank you, Jamal Crawford. Episode 13. Go on YouTube and watch. It's worth the watch. Eyes on the Prize. Episode 13, Gene Mcguire. It's all about education. You'll see Ruth Batson. You'll see Dr. McGuire. But anyway, on last Wednesday, we had just learned of the brutal attack on Dr. McGuire, who is the most fit and feisty 91-year-old you'll ever meet, at Franklin Park as she was walking her dogs the night before. Good news, happy to say, on yesterday, she was released from the hospital. I want to thank Beth Israel Deaconess. They did a fantastic job of caring for her. I got to see her twice. Actually was there Sunday evening with some of the other METCO, former METCO directors, former senior staff at METCO. She is home now, but she's home. She went home yesterday. She's got a lot of rehabbing and recovering and healing yet to do. You'll see if you saw the photo of her leaving, her hand is still bandaged and splints. She came through successful surgery. So just so you'll know, continue to pray. Gina's home. She is healing. But I'm really quick to say when people say to me, is she okay? I say, no, you'll never be okay. You can never be okay after experiencing something like that. So we have to keep our eyes open. Repeat what I said last Wednesday evening, at the press conference. Maybe we could use this as an opportunity, to reset how we respond as a community, how we respond as a police department, how we respond as a city hall government, and how we respond as the elected leaders in our community, stakeholders. We all have to be in this. And, it's not particularly helpful to do finger pointing or whose fault this is, because fault and responsibility are two very different things. The reality is being safe and keeping our community safe is all of our responsibility, right? And when things fall down and break down, we have to check it. That's all. And that's all I'm saying. I think we could continue to do that. We need to be focusing on how we got here. And that brings us to another issue, really, in the squares. One of the reasons for the creation, right? The initial charge for me as a personality on WWOC radio was to bring you all things Black, brown, and COVID, right? It soon became clear that COVID had just impacted every single aspect of our waking and sleeping lives. So everything we do is impacted by it. How we're living today has already been shaped by COVID. We do things differently in some respects. Unfortunately, some things we do the same, which is why COVID is never going to go away. But all of this is connected, right? One of the things that you see in our city is still the fallout from people who are living, on the streets, living. We talk a lot about Mass and Cass, but Mass and Cass has become Nubian Square, has become Grove Hall, has become Clifford Park, where we saw a story in this past week of a 9-year-old who was hospitalized after being stuck by a needle during playing football at the park, fell on a needle because the needles are all over the park. That's a park where kids are supposed to be able to play. Now, you want to talk about responsibility? It is all of ours as adults to make sure that doesn't happen, right? And so what I can tell you is, and why is this connected, as I'm talking about Gene Mcguire, is because that attack in the park has really laid bare some new information that we now know, that the folks that have been moved up the street, around the corner from Mass and Cass, have now made their way into the park. I personally saw the tents. Their tents up in the bushes in Franklin Park where they're living. That is not acceptable, unacceptable, can't happen, can't continue. And as a community, entire community of people, we have to address it. We have to address it. The addiction, what has happened to Black men, to people from across this state who have found their way to Boston, fentanyl addiction, overdose, now opioid addiction, and overdose, now the leading cause of death for Black men in Massachusetts, having increased some 200% since 2019. This should be setting off all kinds of alarms, should be roaring for us, right? And instead, what we see is silence. And so, yeah, we have to get to work. And like I said, it's everybody's responsibility, everyone's, and hope we will be able to get around the table and have a real conversation about that. So that done. Second, what's going on. I'm going to use this. I'm talking fast because there's so much. I want to also update you on what's going on. I think I may have mentioned this a little bit last week about redistricting, just by way of education, tell people again what that is. So, every 10 years, people come knocking on your doors. You get those, the mail from the city. You get that, if somebody knocks, they want to know how many people live in your house, how many people, how many children, how old they are. That's what we call a decennial census. Every 10 years, we do an official census for the federal government, a United States Census. So, and it's on the even, so 2030, 2010, 2020. Well, that 2020 census is used for many things. One of the main purpose and use of the census is to determine how to draw the lines to divide up the state and divide up the city into the political subdivisions by which we elect our representatives. And so in the city of Boston, we have about 670,000 people. And so we have district councilors. So you divide that city up into 9, and it means that about 75 to 78,000 people would be residing in each district, Boston City Council district. Then you have to draw those lines, right? Well, where does the district start? Where does the district end? And that is the process that every 10 years, once we do the census, we look to see what shifts have happened in our population, do we have more people here? Do we have less people here? Because you got to move those lines to make sure that you have some cohesiveness. They call contiguity, meaning they have to be next to each other around how we draw those lines. It sounds very kind of, right? It is an intense and political process. And Boston right now is in the throngs of that process. And by the 7th of November, which is just 3 weeks away, the day before the national, the local, the state elections, by the 7th of November on that Monday, we as a Commonwealth, we as a city of Boston must have approved a map showing how those lines have been drawn. Now, what's the rub, you say, right? What's the rub? What's the big deal? You wouldn't believe the fight that's going on. And if you haven't been watching boston.gov or bostoncitycouncil.gov, because it is our Boston City Council charged with the responsibility of getting around the table and drawing those lines. Now, in the overview of that process, they have to use the Voting Rights Act. They have to use the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which talks about one man, one vote. The Voting Rights Act says still, although we've lost some of the teeth, some of it is still very much there, and says that they have to take into account race, Black, Latino, and Asian, and language minorities to make sure that they are not so dispersed around the city when we draw those lines as to dilute their potential political power. Now, for a long time, Roxbury has been, for the most part, in a city council district. Dorchester, Mattapan, borderline has been in the city council district, but we drew some new lines. And here's the problem or the issue or the challenge for Boston right now in October 2022. Because I've talked about this before, we've this new neighborhood that we created, right? I'm being generous to say we because it wasn't me and it probably wasn't you, but we have a new neighborhood in the city in this last decade called the Seaport, right? And in that Seaport, there are now some close to 6,000 new residents that weren't there in 2010, the last time we did a census. So they have to be accounted for. And they are in what's called District 2, which is currently represented by Ed Flynn, who happens also to be the president of the city council. So He represents District 2. His district also entails places like the Inkwell. I talked about Seaport, the financial district where you've seen this explosion in a new rental condos, luxury condos, and so much so that District 2, represented by Ed Flynn, Councilor Ed Flynn, has 13,000 more people in it than it should, because of the explosion in their population since the last time we did a census. And so we got to redraw the lines in District 2. Well, guess what that means? That when we redraw those lines in District 2, to put him back to the number 75,000, somewhere around 2,000 or 3,000, 2,000 less or more, that means you got to put them somewhere. So all the lines shift to the west, right? So if you think of District 2, like I say, Seaport, near on the water, and they have too many people, that means the lines on all to the west in the city of Boston get affected. What's the line next to that? District 3, Dorchester, part of Roxbury. That means they have to take some of the excess from Councilor Flynn. Well, if we do that, that means the district next to 3 gets moved over, which is 4 and 7. District 7 is Roxbury. District 4 is Dorchester, Mattapan, currently represented by Brian Worrell. District 7 currently represented by Tanya Fernandez Anderson. So their lines shift. And as their lines shift, it impacts the districts next to them. District 5, District 6. District 5, Mattapan, Rosendale, currently represented by Ricardo Arroyo. District 6, currently represented by Kendra Lara. So you see how this all moving parts. Well, it's a pitched battle. Why? Because a whole coalition of community organizations led by the Boston branch NAACP, as they did in 2010 and as they did in 2002 when the city of Boston redistricted, pulled together a whole coalition, Boston Jobs Coalition, Union United for Justice, Mass Vote, Chinese Progressive Association, I know I'm forgetting, Chinese Land Trust, as I think of, Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, how could I forget? The New Democracy Coalition, the Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council, the Ward 12 Democratic Committee, right? And Gang, Carrie Mays, Willington, all of those folks have been working around the clock in the most diverse coming together and put together a map that we believe kind of responds to, comports to the requirements of the Voting Rights Act. So much so that the chair of the City Council Redistricting Committee, Liz Breeden, and the former chair, Ricardo Arroyo, both supported the community unity map and filed that map on Monday. Well, okay, not everybody on the council supports what we did. Why? Because some people have to lose. You got to lose something. So it's been a firestorm, and you'll be reading about it because in fact there's all kinds of meetings going on. And let me tell you this. So as you process and you are listening to the conversations about redistricting in Boston, because they have gotten heated, and as I said, people are like saying stuff out loud, like, wow. If you did not have a chance to watch what's called the Boston City Council working session that happened on Monday, okay? If you didn't get a chance to see that October 17th on Monday, it's worth going on your Google and finding it and watching. You will understand clearly what I mean. Councilor Ed Flynn had plenty to say. In fact, at one point he was pounding the table. Councilor Frank Baker had plenty to say and some kind of eye-popping comments about Boston and white people and Black people and Latino people. And it was kind of bizarre to me because I haven't heard that kind of talk about Boston since the 1980s, right? But it was like, woo. Here's the bottom line. What they want their old Boston back. And they can't have it. Can't. Not because Diane says so, because they can't. They just can't. So, um, yeah, Mr. Cook, I'm glad that this is helpful to you, because it can be, you watch things, you don't really know what you're seeing. But here's the deal. We're in a firestorm, folks. We actually are comfortable with where we are, confident, I should say, because we know we're in the right. We have a map that abides by the tenets of the Voting Rights Act, by the 14th Amendment, respects the obligation of the city to redraw those lines in a way that maximizes Black, Latino, Asian, and language minority votes, because historically they have been completely ignored in Boston and every other place. So Boston's no different. And part of the fight you will hear from the counselors outside of the Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan was that, you ignoring white people. So here's the rub for those who do not know. We have been wholly unable as adults in this country to address head on issues around race. It gets complicated, it gets emotional, it gets personal, it gets economic, it's historical, all of those things, right? And so you hear so much about, well, you shouldn't be taking race into account when you're choosing, schools, when you're choosing candidates for a job, and all of those. But guess what? Redistricting happens to be the one thing in our society, in our community, in our laws, where we, in fact, do take race into account, because it is required that we do. And I think it's a new place for many people to live in, who are used to being able to dismiss it as a legitimate factor, right? The fact is, the Voting Rights Act requires that we do. The 14th Amendment requires that we do. State case law requires that we do. And it doesn't mean it reigns all, but it means race is one of those factors. How we draw lines around pockets of racial concentration in Boston. And so I understand why some people would feel like, this is wrong for me, because there's very few other places in our lives where we do get to say, but you must take this into account. But this happens to be the place where we must. And I think it's just new for some people. And so when you're used to, like I said, being in control and calling the shots and being able to slap down what would otherwise be kind of the right thing to do based on race, when you're used to doing that and people are insisting on equity, sometimes you feel like you're being oppressed, when really it's like not. This is the reality. This is what is required of us. And so when I talk about firestorm, I mean it. And again, I will say, if you don't have a pen, you need to grab it, because I'm going to give you some meeting dates and really, really implore you to attend. If you can watch online, do it. If you have to be there in person, you do that as well. So tonight on Wednesday, right? On Wednesday, October 19th is, what is this today? The 20th, right? Today's 20th. October 19th. Wednesday, October 19th at 6 p.m., the South Boston elected officials, the senators, state reps, city councilors, are hosting a meeting for the residents to attend at the Condon School, Condon, in South Boston, right, at 6 o'clock, so that they can talk to them about the map. They're pissed off. I think the technical term is pissed off. They're upset about this, very. But I encourage you, if you can, you should go. You should go. You should listen. That's this evening, 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. On tomorrow, Thursday, October 20th, the City Council, which is the body that is charged as a whole redistricting committee, is holding a hearing in Dorchester at the Community Academy of Science and Health at 11 Charles Street, 11 Charles Street at 5 p.m., where you'll get to see the maps, you'll get to talk about them, and you get to offer public testimony. You should do that. On very important, and that's for everyone. I encourage people from Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park, South End, South Boston, Charleston, to go. You should go. I don't know if there'll be another public community hearing, but this is before November 7th when they're done. But there's one tomorrow on October 20th at 5 p.m. at the Community Academy of Science and Health at 11 Charles Street in Dorchester. So I think it's near Fields Corner. So pay attention. Pay attention. This is important. Because then on Friday, we're back to City Hall. The city councils will take into account all of what they heard, and they will be back in the building at City Hall, literally working on the map, trying to hammer out some of these issues to the extent they can be. I think that it's important that we pay attention. Like I said, I have a friend, Jamal Crawford, he says that all the time. Pay attention. We need to pay attention. So again, Saturday night, October 22nd, Twist and Shout, Origination. Don't miss it. Calderwood Auditorium, called Calderwood Pavilion on 527 Tremont Street in Boston at 8 p.m. is showtime. So please, they're honoring some wonderful people from the city as well, from across the city. You should go. You should go. Patronize. You'll see, like I said, more of our artists coming next week as well. But please be sure to this evening, October 19th at 6 p.m. at the Compton School cafeteria in South Boston will be the meeting of the South Boston elected officials to talk about redistricting at the Community Academy of Science and Health on tomorrow, October 20th at 11 Charles Street will be a actual city council public hearing for the community, in the community, for you to testify. Take advantage of that. All kind of stuff going. Of course, I always say, please don't be fooled. Flu season is starting. Only 11% of Americans, and not very different in Boston, have gotten this latest booster shot. I know people are sick of it, but I'm not as sick of getting boosted as I am of staying healthy. I'm one of those people. I'm not even going to finish it because I don't want to jinx myself. But just know that COVID's not over. You saw we got a new strain, and the flu and COVID provide a particularly lethal, deadly mix. And so our seniors in particular are especially vulnerable of flu. And if they get COVID during flu, it could be way more like, it just could be bad, and it doesn't have to. So if you haven't, I know it's weird because we don't see the kind of advertising, focus, marketing, information that we were seeing in that first go round, but it's still very much is very real. So do so. You can still get tested. Bowling Building, 12 to 8 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. You can get PCR tested. It is very simple. I was in last week, and actually took my mom the week before on that Wednesday, the 5th, to get her booster shot. We were in and out in about 20 minutes. And so that's what you need to know. And you're going to see me, depending on where I am, I may have a mask on. When I went to the show, Drum Folk Saturday, I wore my mask the whole time I was there because it was a full theater and flu season is upon us. And I don't want to make anybody sick, and I don't want anybody else to get me sick. So I wear them when I'm in crowds. I still wear them at church. But that's on you. That's just me. I know it's personal, personal choice, but think about that. In the meantime, I will be back next Wednesday. We have, I said, what you'll know before then, I'm going to have my special guest will be with us. We're going to have Paul Goodnight here next week. Very rare. He doesn't do very many interviews, so I'm especially privileged to know he's going to be here next week. Go see Twist and Shout on Saturday. Support Origination and the work that they do. It's important. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Woke Women Wednesday. Senator Dianne Wilkerson. See you next.